Thank you for joining our webinar today. We appreciate you being here as we discuss dotBrand's and learn about the .Cisco gTLD. My name's Natalie Brownell. I am a marketing manager here at Markmonitor, and I'll be monitoring that Q&A during the presentation. You'll see me come back on screen whenever there are questions to direct them to the speakers during the discussion today. And with that, I would like to introduce you to your speakers today. We have with us Inga Smith, a legal professional with almost 2 decades of experience at Cisco Systems, specializing in managing global trademark and domain name portfolios, and known for collaborating with cross-functional teams. She develops strategic solutions to optimize processes and enhance operational efficiency. We also have with us a familiar face, Chris Niemi, Manager of Strategic Initiatives and a crucial member of our Global Industry Relations team. He's a domain name professional who celebrated 21 years with Markmonitor and the corporate registrar space this year. And he's a subject matter expert on ICANN's new gTLD program, a thought leader known for providing service and support solutions around domain strategy, domain disputes, and dotBrand services. Thank you all again for joining today. I will go ahead and pass off to Chris to take you through today's agenda.
All right. Well, thanks for that wonderful welcome. And again, I'm just really excited today to be here. I'm so happy to talk with my friend and peer, Inga, and I'm excited to hear her tales about Cisco and their actions with the .Cisco gTLD. So again, welcome, Inga, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Sure. So, okay, yeah, we're going to talk about a couple of different things as we go through today's webinar. So we're going to just have a quick discussion about the new gTLD program overall, ICANN's program. Then we're going to talk about .Cisco. We're going to talk about how Cisco and Markmonitor have worked together over a number of years, and then interesting applications of employing their gTLD. And then we'll discuss some of the services and how we work with them, and then talk about the next round. So we got a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Okay, so picture in your mind 2012. I think the iPhone was 5 years old. Marvel's Avengers is about to be the biggest movie in the world. I think Barack Obama was still president. Like, it's been a lot of things have changed in the ensuing 13 years, but I don't know if you remember where you were, Inga, in 2012 or what you were doing.
It seems a long time ago.
Yep.
But I definitely remember, this time of registering .Cisco. It was a busy time. It was a time of uncertainty. It was a lot going on. And I know when that time frame came, it was just like, it was a question of like the why. Why are we registering .Cisco? And I think it had a lot to do with, because it was uncertain, like the fear of missing out. We didn't want to miss out on this opportunity to own and operate a .brand. So that is what 2012 looked like. It was a very busy time for us, but it was a changing time in this domain landscape and space.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. So yeah, 2012 was sort of the culmination of work that ICANN had done in the policy development space that they started back in 2007. Nobody really thinks about it unless you're a domain nerd like me, but ICANN had sort of allowed different TLDs to be sort of registered in rounds, even though it was more of informal things like back in 2000 and 2004. So the community had come up with this idea that they wanted to allow people to sort of apply in mass, and they weren't sure exactly how that was going to work out. But that public policy work went from 2007 until in 2011, the round was announced, and then in 2012, everybody applied. So just a quick catch up on some of the numbers. There were 1,930 applications for TLDs that were about 1,400 unique strings, and of those, around 600 or so were what we would now consider .brand. So Cisco was in good company with a lot of folks who had applied for their own brand strings in the round. So speeding up to today, which again, the biggest dozen years later, we're down to around 1,100 TLDs that have been delegated, of which somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 and change are .brand still. And overall, the whole gTLD kind of space, there's about 45 million different registrations. So a lot has gone on in those 13 years. with that, we're about to go into this next thing, talking more about some of that Cisco history. All right, well, it sounds like we have some interesting stuff to go over for the remainder of the webinar today.
Sounds like it. I wanted to add in when we applied for .cisco, initially we were going to register .webex, and there was another brand that's escaping me right now, but we had intentions of applying for all three of those .brands. But given the complexity of the application process, the financial commitments along the way, we actually decided to just move forward with .cisco only.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So how are those decisions made, if you're aware, or who is involved in making those calls?
So like you said, 2012 was a long, long time ago. I did have to go back and do some refreshers there, but it was quite a bit of decision makers involved because it was truly a collaborative, cross-functional effort because of the uncertainty. And again, this new brand was definitely going to have some form of impact on the company. So it involved leaders and executive decision makers from our digital marketing team. And digital marketing was actually the team that led this effort to acquire .cisco. Even though there was some chatter, from the legal side of things, it was the digital marketing team that wanted, I'm sure, to make sure that they had a digital footprint in this space that was unknown of what was to come. But our digital marketing team was a stakeholder, legal from a trademark perspective, and then, the ICANN regulations, the finance team. There's definitely a significant financial impact on acquiring and maintaining a brand. The financial statements were required, and then there was also our IT folks. I'm sure there's some I'm probably missing out, but the infrastructure requirements and the security, we had to definitely work with IT and keep everyone in the loop during that process.
Right. So yeah, I think that's interesting that marketing was probably the leader, because I think, based on my memories of the time, I know that a lot of this kind of value propositions were tied to this notion of branding, that your TLD now contains your brand and every domain, every URL that you're going to register. So I think that seems to be sort of an interesting reflection on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and they still own .cisco. They manage the domain as far as how we entered that space on the internet, how it will be used, and we'll go into use case later. But they are the key primary stakeholders for .cisco.
Yeah, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to the next idea, I think Markmonitor and Cisco worked together for a long time. Cisco's a large multi-billion-dollar company, providing different services in the networking and many other sort of computer-related space. As a corporate registrar whose idea is to provide, white gloved service, I know the organizations have worked together, I think, going back all the way to 2003. But in this particular area, when .brand, I think we ended up starting working together in 2019. So do you have any thoughts, or kind of what ended up happening that led to that decision, or how we started there?
Yes. So we do have today, actually, I'm celebrating 18 years at Cisco.
All right.
So,
Yay.
and it's funny going back, I think I celebrated my 17th year anniversary with you all in New York last year.
Oh,
So
awesome.
it's becoming it's becoming a habit. So I'm enjoying celebrating my anniversaries with you all. And I enjoy the relationship that we have established over the years. I know that it's probably been about 16 years I've been in this domain space and working with you all. So that kind of gives you some background on our relationship, but it has been a pleasure. Primarily, when we registered .cisco, we engaged with a third party consultant to assist us with the application process. And once we acquired and had the .cisco, we just had the domain sitting there with like the required nick.cisco that was a requirement by ICANN, and a few other, more content marketing, content driven sites. But that was the use for several years, probably almost 8, 9, 10 years. I don't know. But it had been some time that it was just sitting with content related sites. And so since 2019, of course, one of the key driving factors, I think, with a lot of folks is money. So we were able to get a significant discount by moving .cisco over to Markmonitor. And because you all manage our regular day-to-day domain portfolio, so transitioning and streamlining and having everything in one place definitely made the process more efficient and, more easily to manage. But aside from that, aside from money, I know money talks, but customer service is extremely important. And you all, like you said, white glove, you definitely have white glove services and you provide us with, the best services and responsiveness. And Chris, I mean, you're definitely a subject matter expert in this space. I definitely bug you like, Chris, what is this I'm getting in my email box? Can you help explain this to me? So those things have definitely been, and the responsiveness have definitely been a plus since we've transitioned. But our use has evolved, and we'll get into use case shortly. But like I mentioned, we just kind of had .cisco because we didn't want to be left out. We didn't have a use case back in 2012 when we decided to register the domain. So now that we currently are using it and we needed assistance and just day to day help with registering domains, updating name servers, and coordinating those efforts with the business unit and stakeholders, that has definitely proven to be a great asset to have and a partnership to have with you all.
Great. Yeah, we definitely feel the same way. I mean, I heard somebody say it recently, and I think it captures a lot of it, that we lead with security, strategy, and service. So hopefully we're delivering those things to
Yes,
you.
definitely.
Oh, and I see Natalie up on the screen. What's happening?
Oh, so we have a question from the audience. Inga, I believe this one's for you.
Okay.
So our attendee asks, so if the Cisco digital marketing was the key stakeholder in .cisco usage, did they also secure all of the budget internally? Or was that budget shared among other stakeholders like legal, security, etc.?
So very, very good question. They actually budgeted the .cisco registration, and they do continue to pay the annual fees. I don't know if you want to get into it now, Chris, but we do have a unique process that the digital marketing team has implemented. When there is a team, and primarily it's our security and trust organization that's utilizing .cisco heavily at the current time, we charge them to register a new domain, just a one-time fee that assists the digital marketing team in recuperating and in covering those costs. I will add that every year when the annual fees are coming due, and I reach out to digital marketing to say, hey, your bill's going to be coming in on whatever date, and I need the cross charge number. It's like we still have to pay for this because all of our other domains come out of the legal budget. So every year he tries to push that bill over to legal, but I push back a little bit.
Let's do this day. You say no thanks.
Yeah. So I think it has been, I believe it's probably been about 2-3 years when digital marketing has started charging the business units that need the .cisco domains a certain fee in order to help cover some of their costs.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point, because the ICANN registry agreement is a 10-year agreement, and that's what is signed between the registry operator, which in this case is Cisco, and ICANN. So I think people have to keep in mind like the long game of that you're going to have this thing for a while, and then it could renew for another 10 years thereafter, and there will be annual fees. And if you have a large enough organization, you can maybe make other business units, other product lines, you can sort of make them feel the brunt of managing this, and they can treat it like a regular registration, or somebody's gonna have to pay for something. So I think that's a really interesting point.
I have one more question for you before moving on. Also regarding cost. Do you have any advice for getting buy-in regarding the cost?
Any advice getting buy-in regarding the cost? I
So here,
think, oh, did you want to answer
oh,
that
I was
question?
just going to give you time to think for a second. So just to
Okay.
remind folks that the fee, the ICANN fee up front in the last round was $185,000, and in this round it's 227,000 US. So it is a large fee up front, and then going into continuing to manage it over those times, like I was just talking about, those 8 or 10 years after the thing gets delegated, there will be different fees that are, going to be via your RSP and your data escrow provider and your, registrar. So price is definitely a thing. So I just wanted to remind people of that, but you can actually answer the question now.
Okay. So I think that like I gave the scenario of, buy-in, maybe seeing if you can get other organizations that would potentially have use cases for your dot brand to collaboratively come together, possibly to cover some of the expenses. And I also think making sure that you do have the correct stakeholders that have that decision-making authority to cover those costs. But I also think like one of the benefits, and Chris, you'll have to correct me on the number, like once you have your dot brand and however you want to use it, like there's X hundred of domains or hundreds of domains that are covered in that fee, correct? Where you can just register, where a .com or a ccTLD could cost you a few $100s a year, you may be able to utilize or show in that respect, like, hey, if we own dot so and so, we could be saving however many dollars in some of these foreign extensions where we may not have to register, or don't, or choose to let go or something of that nature. But Chris, what is that threshold? Do you recall?
So ICANN, once the TLD is delegated, charges for up to 50,000 transactions a year, which I think is usually like 25,000-ish domains, registrations, renewals, whatever. So that's for their ICANN fee is 25,750 a year. For that base amount, if you go up higher than that, there'll be some additional fees. And then just depending on how the RSP in question is set up, you might have some tiered pricing depending on, again, if usually we don't see it a ton in dotBrand because most of the time there's only a handful of organizations that have more than a few thousand registrations. But in theory, if you decided to give one to every client in the world or something, you might get into the tens of thousands of registrations.
But I mean, I think that maybe potentially just trying to see or show to whoever your stakeholder is that it could possibly save you money
Yeah.
in the long run.
Yeah,
Even,
for sure.
even on the enforcement side, again, I say use case because who knows, like if you really drive your dot brand, it could save in other areas, whether it's enforcement or registering domains. So I would put some thought into that.
Yeah, I think one area for sure is, with larger companies who have bigger budgets to like do product launches, if you're going to buy like a .com domain, that's like a big term in the aftermarket, you can be spending 6 or 7 figures on that. So if you have your own .brand, that fee can go away because then you can get product name .brand and you're done. Like there's zero worries about acquisitions, zero problems with completing a registration. That's for sure one way to save some outlay there. Natalie, looks like you have another question.
We do. We have two more questions, so lots of interest here. The first one says, thank you, Inga. As usage has grown, has Cisco tried to calculate ROI, financial and non-financial, for operating their brand TLD?
That is a great question. At the moment, I I have not on the legal side, but I'm sure our digital marketing team has, and I do not have any insight into that.
Yeah,
Any
I think ROI is a real tricky, it's hard to quantify in this space. I mean, I think there's definitely benefits and advantages of running a TLD, but I mean, I think in our experience, we haven't seen anybody really crack the code and have a great, algorithm or something to figure out exactly what the ROI is. But, there's definitely value in sort of the consumer trust and some of these other things we were just talking about,
Mhm.
of that you might be able to trim some of your broader domain portfolio. There might be savings there. There's some other ways that you can sort of display the value, but I think it's going to be sort of vary depending on each entity's own domain portfolio strategies.
Thank you both. We have one more question for now before we move on to the next section. So I think what they're asking, if you're making your business case and you are trying to kind of like weight the benefits per
Mhm.
department, um, would you say it could be more beneficial for, the digital marketing, for the brand team, for legal or security?
That is an interesting question. Again, I believe that determining who your primary stakeholder is will have a lot to determine, like the percentage. And again, we involved, you know, 100% our digital marketing team wanted this .cisco domain. 100% legal was supporting them in that effort, right? Um, and so everything else was buy-in and tie-in. And again, a lot of those decisions were made with our head of our trademark team at the time and working with our consultant and making sure that they had all of the right people and decision makers in that place and space. And I'm not 100% sure if I've answered the question properly. So if that's clear, let me know. But if they have any follow-ups, feel free to reach out.
I think
Absolutely.
I think to add on to that, one of the places I think that you talked earlier, Inga, about the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of 2012. Nobody quite knew what was
Mhm.
happening. It was a branding play. It was a marketing idea. I think there's been a definite shift sort of in the marketplace and in the use cases of moving into the security space, that we're seeing a lot of different folks using their TLDs, in DNS infrastructure. They're using it in their systems behind their firewalls. They're using their domains for internal purposes, like new hires go to some like an onboarding site for Fox, like the large media company. They go to a .fox domain to do some of their initial trainings and things like that. Or at Sky, they use it to figure out what the menu in the cafeteria is that day. Like there's all these different things where, because you have absolute control of being the registry yourself, you can lock everything down. You have complete control. There's really no fear of like somebody transferring the domain away to, because you're only going to have a single registrar. There's nowhere to transfer it to, so like there can't be like a theft or a cyber flight. There's other ways that you can maximize security around things. You can utilize DNSSEC on new gTLDs. You can do what's called PSTD mark, which is a security protocol that you can apply at the actual top level domain level instead of just the local domain for the email address in question. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and I think over time that security, if that was 10%, 12 years ago, maybe it's 30% now or 40% now, just depending on the organization.
We have one more follow-up question along the same lines, and then I'll allow you afterwards to talk about the use cases. But the attendee says, super interesting, Inga and Chris. You were speaking about possibly saving money by not having to register so many domains defensively. Has Cisco been able to trim its portfolio as a result of having a .brand .cisco?
That is a great question. I am currently in the process of reviewing our regular domain portfolio at the moment, but and we'll transition into use case, but currently our use case it's not focused right now in utilizing .cisco to cover some of our defensive filings or other I'm sorry, defensive registrations. I do trademarks too. Defensive registrations that we currently have in our portfolio. So that is something that we have not implemented as of yet.
Yeah, I think one of the exercises we like to do with folks pretty regularly is try to help them optimize their portfolio. To your point of trying to figure out using some of our proprietary scoring algorithms to try to value domains of like, maybe this one that was on a campaign you used 5 years ago isn't necessarily needed, and maybe you don't need to renew it, and those sorts of things.
Mhm.
So, I mean, again, dotBrand gives you flexibility that you could potentially sort of move things around and shift things, and maybe consider being a little more aggressive in those spaces. Obviously, on your prime crown jewel type domains, it's probably not going to take those away, but in those lower echelon of sort of specific use cases, there might be times where that could come into play.
Definitely.
So, all right. Well, I think we've covered a lot there. So why don't we get into those use cases that we've been talking about? I think you already alluded to that early on in like kind of 2015, 2016, the first wave of usage for .cisco was a lot of marketing kind of pages, and I looked them up, and a lot of them are sort of they're redirects to existing Cisco.com sites, and a lot of them are about things like products, services, a couple of careers pages, things like that. But it sounds like there was kind of a shift in the last couple of years to this notion of using this system. It's called FedRAMP. So I was going to give a quick definition of that, and then you can tell us all about what Cisco's doing there.
Okay.
So FedRAMP is the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. So it's a U.S. federal government program. So essentially, it allows people who are cloud services providers to get approved by the federal government so that they can be utilized in different federal agencies. So it's kind of a one-stop, like one size fits all. Like you do an application, you get cleared as a vendor in this particular area, and then your services that meet the FedRAMP requirements can be distributed across different federal agencies. So, I mean, it's a big deal. It's a very rigorous, it's a very robust process to get approved. I think we talked about maybe in 2022, the law went into place where FedRAMP became a thing and became actualized. And then it sounds like about a year later, Cisco got approved, if not in that window, and then it started to utilize it on our domains. So I don't know
Yeah.
what you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah. So our use case is for FedRAMP compliancy. And it was a few years ago. Um, the US government is one of Cisco's largest clients. And so it was a few years ago when I started getting new domain requests for domains, and they were like, it's FedRAMP compliant. So thank you very much for the definition, because I'm like, what the heck is FedRAMP? So having that act come into play, we then had to get, we had a lot of I had a lot of requests for separate domain registrations that couldn't fall within our normal group of our Cisco domains, and we had to have them separate. I had to limit access to them. There were like certain citizenship requirements and like is it DNSSEC enablement. So it was a lot at that time of separate domains because different groups were offering cloud services to the US government and one of our, particularly the Department of Defense. So, our security and trust organization is the team that presented us with the use case on why utilizing .cisco for their purposes and easily being able to comply with FedRAMP's requirements and the security of having the .cisco is what developed within the last few years. So I've been working with that team whenever there is a new domain registration request, updates to name servers, things of that nature, but it has streamlined and I think made their process more efficient. And I'm sure the US government is probably pleased with or having that extra level of security because it is sensitive government information
Yeah.
that's being transpired on our cloud services platforms.
Yeah, and I think we talked about like just even yesterday we were looking around and like Cisco has whole pages about how they support the FedRAMP,
Mhm.
certifications that there are all sorts of different, applications, Department of Defense and other folks. So I mean, it's a pretty robust and big program, and Cisco's utilizing this .brand to do that. So I think that's a real kind of an innovative way that I don't think nobody could predict that this was going to happen in 2012. Yet here you're using your .brand in a new way that people are figuring out.
Right. It wasn't predicted. And I think that it's great because I mean, at least we can say, hey, we're using our .brand in this regard.
Yeah.
And we didn't miss out. We would have missed out if we didn't
Yeah.
participate in 2012. But luckily it was there and it was available to utilize .cisco when the business needed it the most. So, and I'll add like our digital, it was definitely, I think within Cisco, there's just as many people that know about .cisco that don't know about .cisco.
Mm,
But our digital marketing team helped manage our landscape and how we were going to use it, because we would definitely
mm.
get requests and people were like, oh, we want .cisco. And it was like, unless you had a solidified use case, and even today, it's just not open to anyone within the organization.
So is it more of an ad hoc thing where you just sort of make those decisions on the spot, or do you have like policies around that, or how does
So
that
right
work?
now, the only policy around Cisco is managed by the digital marketing team, and it is only for
Mm,
FedRAMP. And like the digital marketing team used it for some of their marketing content early on. But I'm sure if someone or a business unit or an organization came to us with a good use case, it would probably go through an approval process on the digital marketing side
yeah,
to utilize Cisco for whatever their use case is.
yeah. And I think just in looking at some of the examples of the domains that have been registered the last couple of years, again, the fact that you have essentially unlimited availability, you can pick whatever domain is needed based on whatever naming convention you guys come up with based on the
Mhm.
service that you're implementing. So I think it's definitely maximizing that flexibility piece of you have access to whatever you want basically inside the
Mhm.
own file.
It is a nice benefit having it. I do believe that.
Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting. I mean, we've had some clients in the past talk about FedRAMP, and it's a major, investment. It's a major, effort to even get approved for it, and then keep those maintenance up. So I think that's a great way to continue to implement and deploy these brands.
Hmm. I 100% agree. And especially, when you're dealing with the government, just I believe that having Cisco is just an extra layer and level of security that you could not get out of the .coms that we were registering for these groups prior
Yeah,
to utilizing Cisco.
great. So all right. Well, we've had a lot of questions. We want to leave some time for some questions at the end. So we're going to scoot through a couple of things about some of the services that we've been working with you on. So what the main areas we've been helping support you is with our sort of, again, tied into this idea that a TLD is going to be a long acting asset that you're going to have for 10 or more years. Maintenance is an important key, and there's sort of a bunch of administrative tasks that have to be done on a regular level. So, we help things like we can be your abuse contact with ICANN in the rare instance that an abuse of action ever happened, which hasn't happened on Cisco. So, we can do things like that. We can work with ICANN as your compliance contact. So, again, in the rare instance that for some reason some ICANN compliance issue came up, we would be your first line of defense. We review the thing, try to figure out what was needed, and I'd help you if we figure it out. But again, we haven't had those because you guys are using it in very appropriate ways, and that's the whole point of a .brand. And then we do some other things like every year. So every year, about January 20th, we come back from the holidays. Then I started annoying Inga, and I send her an email and say, "Hey, we got to do the annual specification 13." So
Luckily,
we
no
work.
signatures are required anymore. So that's
Yes, yes.
plus, because then I
So
would have to bug our digital marketing team. So,
yeah, yeah. So that's basically so it's a self-certification that ICANN requires of a .brand, where every year they attest that the prior year they met all the requirements. So again, on the technical level, a .brand means that you have a trademark for the term that's to the right of the dot. You have an underlying trademark clearinghouse record for that term and that trademark, and that you're only registering domains in your TLD to yourself as the registry operator, your licensees, or your affiliates. So basically, it's just saying, hey, we follow the rules, we're still active, everything's up to speed. And then we submit the button in the system, send a ticket to ICANN, and we move on about our lives. But these are just some of the regular things that have to go on just to make sure that the TLD stays active and in ICANN's good graces on the compliance front. And then one other thing we do is kind of consolidating it because, as Inga knows, there's a lot of different parties involved of RSPs and data escrow agents and ICANN, and there's a lot of bills to be paid. So we tried to streamline that and make it easy that we can fill the gap and make those payments on the behalf of the registry operator. So we've been doing that for a number of years now, where you just pay us once up front, and then through the year we pay the bills as they come up to keep everything on the up and up. So I think by doing those two things, we try to keep a lot of the work off you. It frees you up to do your day job, and it allows Cisco to maximize its regular business of doing its core competencies of, what Cisco does. So I don't know if you got any thoughts or about that.
No, I thank you, and I appreciate your expertise in that area because Chris is always there when I need him and when I need clarity. When things are changing with ICANN, I'm always informed, and I'll always say, "Okay, I think I need to talk to you about this," just to make sure I'm clear on certain requirements. But it has been definitely a great partnership and just the ability to take a lot of things off of my plate related to Cisco and knowing that they're in good hands with Chris and we're not missing any deadlines or anything like that. So it's been great.
Great. Well, I'm glad I could help. To pivot then, because you're obviously in the unique case of you have your own brand, but then obviously a lot of people on this call are still learning about deciding if they want to apply next year when the window opens. We have come up with a service package that we want to offer to try to, again, streamline, simplify this really complex and complicated process to make it as low touch as possible for applicants. I kind of recently came up with this idea of it's like a two-phase project. I call it like the idea phase, the implementation phase. And the idea part is from now until you apply and getting all the way through till delegation of, I know what I want. I need to do the work to get it. And then it's going to become a real thing. So delegation is when the TLD actually exists in the root and becomes visible on the internet. So before we get to that point, there's a lot of work that has to happen in the pre-application window, discussing some of these choices about how we're going to apply, gathering information, and then actually writing the application and submitting it, and then working all the way through ICANN's evaluation processes. So we help entirely with that whole life cycle. And then the secondary part is that implementation phase. So once the TLD exists, and then until you launch it, there's much activities that have to happen on the technical side. We work with registry service providers, which used to be called backend registry operators, to make sure they can run your infrastructure for you. We work with the data escrow agent to make sure that the information is escrowed appropriately per the ICANN registry agreement. And make your payments to ICANN and work there. So, and then again, doing those things we just talked about of doing the maintenance support, the administrative support, compliance support, and then the payment as well to try to make it as the one touch as possible to not have to have, you have to set up vendors and deal with all the individual payments and deal with all the annoying stuff that nobody wants to deal with. So we do have these services and we're looking forward to offering them to folks who want help in the space. Speaking about timelines, because of course everything's tied to time in the ICANN world, even though 13 years seems like a long time to the rest of us. Next year is when the ICANN application window is supposed to happen. So everything that they've been working towards is to be able to apply in April of next year. And, that's that, as we know, in large corporations, large bureaucracies, 7 months isn't a very long time to kind of get everybody lined up, get all your ducks in a row, and get an application figured out and a plan of how to do use cases. So even though it sounds like we have a lot of time to plan, that the time is now to do those things that Inga was talking about, of getting the right decision makers in the rooms, having people talk, having people come up with the use cases, have people determine, why is this important to us and what we want to do. Oh, it looks like Natalie has a question.
Hi, I do. So, all this talk about timelines, we have a question. Somebody is wondering when is going to be the next opportunity to apply. I think since you just addressed 2026, they're probably wondering about, is there any discourse about a follow-up application period, or is this it?
So that's a good question. In the current version of the applicant guidebook, there is an idea of what would be required in order for a next round to start. So the ICANN board has to do a certain set number of actions regarding like a list of all the TLDs that like the final list of what has been applied for in this next round have to be available in public and written in stone. And then a few other things need to happen. You know, based on past experience, 13 years is a long time. I personally don't think it'll take another 13 years, but knowing ICANN, you know, you could blink, and if they take a year or two to talk about it, if it takes the ICANN board a while to take those actions, we could be 3 to 5 years from another round or longer. So, you know, I doubt 13 years will be the next round, but I also doubt it'll be very quickly after this round. So that's an important thing to factor in when you're deciding, you know, if you want to proceed, that if you miss this window, you know, it may be a minute until you have another chance to try. So that's an important thing to consider. The other thing tied to that timeline idea is the budget. So I don't know, Inga, does it take a long time to get budget approval inside your organization if you wanted
Very
to ask for
long.
200 grand? Yeah.
Yes, it takes a long time to get just about anything when it comes to money approved. So,
Yeah. So
but
yeah,
definitely that amount, it can take a while.
yeah. So I mean, I think the folks in finance, you know, the folks in accounting, the people who are going to sign off on these expenditures, you're going to want to get that involved and try to figure out what your budget cycles are. You're going to have to get approval from, because coming next, you know, Q2 of next year, there's going to be that big first payment going out to ICANN to apply. So that's definitely one larger part of trying to keep in mind with this timeline and sort of actions that need to happen in the near future. So, all right, I think we're going to pivot to some last advice before any final other questions. So I guess, you know, Inga, you've been up front and personal with this process with the dotBrand for a number of years now. What would be your advice to anybody who either has their own dotBrand or somebody who would maybe want to apply for a dotBrand of their own?
So I think my advice would be, if you're considering a dot brand, and even if you own one, like continuing to try to seek out use cases to utilize your dot brand. And if you don't own one and you're on the fence, I would probably, I mean, it took us what, about almost 10 years to start using dot Cisco, but it was a good thing that we had it. But I would seek out use cases for current now, use for now, and then potentially, you know, like, where do you see yourself in 2028 where it could benefit the company? Because if you do happen to miss out, you're probably looking at, it seems like it's far away, like probably 2030 or something plus, um, before you'd have an opportunity to utilize your dot brand. So I would definitely think about the now and the future, and just continue to seek out business units and see how you can, you know, this domain could help them operate their business, or help with enforcement issues or anything of that nature. So that would be my advice.
Sure. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think speaking to your points about innovation, and we talked about people didn't know what they didn't know in 2012, and certain
Mhm.
things didn't exist, like Web3 or blockchain technologies, you know, .eth, that didn't come about until the late 20 teens, like 2017. So, you know, people might find ways they could perhaps use the .brand to provide Web3, you know, products or services. You know, the buzzword of the day is AI, artificial
Right.
intelligence everywhere. And we're still trying to figure out exactly how that's going to have effect on search, on other kind of consumer behaviors. And you know, it seems like dotBrand is definitely going to play into that, you know,
Yeah.
contribute to some of the
Maybe ask
results around
AI.
there.
Maybe ask AI how it will play into it in
Yeah,
5
exactly.
years. I don't
Chat,
know. They might give
chat
you a great
GPT, tell me
response.
how a dotBrand works or something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it'll probably
So,
spit out some stuff. So just an option. Hey.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, but again, yeah, just innovation. Like, you know, FedRAMP didn't exist till 2022. So
Right.
who knew 10 years
Exactly.
ago that that would be a thing? So, I think there's sort of a lot of, we know what works now, but we also don't know what's coming in the future, and dot.brand could play into that. So, I think it
Exactly.
definitely allows for a lot of opportunities and, um, down the road. And then I guess the other thing would be what you said, just get the stakeholders involved, use case, use case, use case. We don't want, because in the first round, because so few people had a real plan, they eventually kind of, the idea fell out of favor. Some of them terminated their agreements for their
Mhm.
TLDs. And, we kind of saw how that played out. And it just seems like a waste of time if you're not going to actually think about directly utilizing this important asset. So I think those are some
Right.
different things to keep in mind.
Definitely.
So, all right. Well, we're almost to the top of the hour. Is there any other questions in the queue? I don't know, Natalie, is there anything left?
Hello, hello. Actually, we did get a question, and I think you just addressed it in the last statement that you made, but perhaps for additional emphasis or clarity, this attendee asks, if we don't have active plans to use a dot.brand, does it make sense to apply defensively? So I think you just spoke to that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's an absolute no. I mean, I think there are handfuls of cases where people have existing marks where they regularly compete in the marketplace against people in other trademark classes. So you might sell internet services and someone else sells auto parts or something, but you have a similar domain. If that's the case, like the classic example people talk about was Delta Airlines and Delta Faucets.
Mhm.
So, if you already know you have cases like that where you're coming into contact with other folks, maybe it is a wise play to give yourself the chance to get a very unique trademark that has no, very rare cross, contact with other folks. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but yeah, I think I think use case is, the watchword right now of, if you're gonna go to all this effort. The example I always say is, why are you gonna have this fancy sports car in your garage if you never drive it? So, you know, come up with that driving trip. Where am I going to go? Am I going to drive down, Highway 1 in California and, look at the ocean? Like, let's use the thing. Let's get it out there.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any last minute anything, Inga, before we get ready to sign off here?
No, I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. I enjoyed sharing with everyone today how .Cisco is being used and utilized, and hopefully we'll have some more use cases to share in the near future. So thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. We really appreciate that you were so kind as to join us. It's been a great hour. Really appreciate talking to you as always. And with that, Natalie, do you have any other final thoughts?
No, I think you've said that well, Chris. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.